It is the long, long, long surreal early summer of 2020. Because of the pandemic, you have been inside with your family for a few months now, and it is heating up outside. Not just because summer is beginning to really settle in, but because the nation is on fire. George Floyd, a black man, has been lynched by 4 police officers, and the video of his murder is played again and again. People are in the streets, and they are angry, demanding restitution, and beyond that, justice and reparation. You have been one of these people in the streets. You have also been a witness to the intimidation, repression, and assault of protesters exercising their First Amendment rights. Your city is noisy. Day after day, you hear the wail of ambulances, the barking of agitated dogs, the whir of helicopters. You crave silence, repose, respite from the heat. One day, a friend emails with a link to an Airbnb on a quiet property less than 2 hours' drive from your city. From the images, it appears verdant and peaceful. There are hammocks and a small, inviting pool. You have never stayed in an Airbnb, but this one features superhosts with high scores for hospitality and cleanliness. You book your stay. Driving up several weeks later, you are aware that the property is even more lovely than it looked on your computer screen. The sign outside says, Certified Organic Farm. There is the main house at the end of a tree-lined gravel drive. Your host's directions are impeccable. Turning left, you follow a grassy lane to your cottage. There are 2 other cottages, both of them quaint, as the website promised. The key is in the door, where it is supposed to be. The cottage is clean, as advertised. No one comes to greet you. The pandemic makes that risky, but it is wonderful to smell the air without a mask. You breathe. But something is unsettling, and you realize it right away. It is in the architecture. It is in the smoothness of the worn wooden floorboards. It is in the very silence that you craved. Later, as you are walking around the acres of fields, you run into your hosts and ask. Yes, they say, this 18th century farm was the site of slavery. Enslaved Africans and their descendants lived and worked here. The ones tasked with agricultural labor lived in rough-hewn structures, out of sight from the main house. Others lived in cottages, one of which you now inhabit. On one of the websites for the property, these modest structures are called dependencies. In the Oxford English Dictionary, which you consult later, definition 4D of dependency is an appurtenance to a dwelling house. As an example, the dictionary cites an 1822 novel by Washington Irving, in which a character visits the stables, dog kennel, and other dependencies of a grand estate. The association of dependency with animals does not escape your notice. Your Airbnb is haunted. It is haunted in the sense of which Toni Morrison wrote in her novel Beloved. Enslaved people occupied the space you now occupy, are trying to relax in. You attempt to imagine what the cottage, long since refurbished and rebuilt, once was, who it housed. You realize that despite everything you might have known about this lovely place, you somehow were unprepared for this revelation. You feel dumbfounded by your own powers of denial and by the irony of having wanted to get away from the city and its noisy reminders of social strife and struggle. Now that you know about where you are, where you have arrived, you cannot unknow. You grasp for a means of honoring the ghosts. In your culture, lifestyle gurus talk about mood boosts and the value of self-care rituals that promise to dispel negative energy. Websites provide how-tos for sage-burning ceremonies based on Native American tradition. You want something other than such empty, commercialized gestures. Using the Wi-Fi connection from your cottage, which was once slave quarters, you email your rabbis. You explain that you need a prayer, a ritual. You tell them you've considered the mourner's Kaddish, a prayer you can recite by heart. But the praise song to your Jewish God seems inadequate to the task. Besides, the thing you seek to reckon with has not died. It has just changed form. It is a hum at the edge of hearing. And it is not just the cottage that vibrates, but the trees and the fields, the nation. Your rabbis write back. Perhaps you could look to the Passover tradition of ritually expelling chametz, or leavening, from the home. In preparation for the holidays, Jews remove, sell, and even burn chametz. But for the undetected crumbs that we inevitably overlook, we say the bitul, a prayer of nullification. There are rules for saying the bitul. The bitul must be said in a language you understand. For you, that means saying it in English, not Hebrew. The bitul is the responsibility of everyone in your household. The bitul requires tending. Because it may not have worked the first time, you need to repeat it. A few days later, when you leave the cottage, you do your makeshift ritual. You take a small stone from the ground and toss it over a fence that marks the boundaries of the estate. And you say a prayer of nullification for the chametz that remains. You imagine the chametz as dust, microscopic particles that permeate the air, but which you can only see under certain conditions of light. You know you can't expel them, but you ask for their nullification. The house of the American nation was built on arrogance, on chametz, that takes several names. One of the names is slavery. Another is white supremacy. One of the names is law and order. Another is angry black woman. Even words like diversity can be forms of chametz. The chametz of anti-blackness is impervious to good intentions. There is chametz in your liberal city and your tolerant home. By definition, chametz persists in the very places you think you have already purified. To nullify it requires intention, concentration, constancy, and vigilance. It has been months since your discomforting confrontation with the history that shapes the present, but you have not forgotten the lesson of that time and place, or the blessing that you said. This structure was built as a house of slavery. Just as slavery has an afterlife, so the memories contained in the walls of this house, and in the very ground on which it stands, are a stain to this day. We want and need to rebuild the house. Let all who enter the walls of this house learn from our past and our present, and sound the shofar of freedom. May the bell of freedom always ring, and may it echo through our very lives.